We're finishing up this series that we've called Jesus the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And today we're going to talk about, the joy we have in running with Jesus, and that we can run with joy, just as he ran with joy in the time he was here. And so let me ask you that. What gives you pure joy? Like when you think about, even more than your happiest moment, their most joy-filled moments of life, what are some of those? Grandkids. Yeah, so Debbie, not to call you out on this because nobody else did either, but there's something special about the birth of a grandkid, and grandmas are more likely to say the birth of my grandkids than a mother is to say the birth of my child, right? Although it is pure joy, it's not just joy, right? It's not always enjoyable, but it's great joy and great suffering, but they meet together in a beautiful way. But yeah, absolutely, moments like that. What are other just moments of great joy? When the whole family gets together and they stand around in the living room and play their guitars and sing, right? Or whatever your family does. Oh yeah, filling those little kids full of sugar and saying, bye, see you later. Yeah, I always love celebrating my nieces and nephews' birthdays with the loudest toy I could think to buy. The drum, or did any of you ever get the chicken limbo game? Oh, it's a terrible game. I loved it. My brothers had this for their kids. I think they gave it to one another. They must have quit manufacturing them by the time we had kids, but it was this limbo. You know what limbo is, right? You have this limbo game, and you had the two poles on either sides, and then if you bumped the pole off, you heard this awful chicken bark, 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 bark. And the kids discovered quickly you could just trigger that really quickly, and I may have shown them how to do that, just to trigger that. My brothers loathed that game, but pure joy. What was that? Oh yeah, drum set given to a niece or nephew is a beautiful thing unless they're living with you. Yeah, pure joy. Oh yes, but they learn how to unplug those headphones. An electronic drum set with headphones is kind of what Francis was talking about. Pure joy. Pure joy is not just a good feeling that fades by the afternoon when the wrapping paper gets tossed. It's not temporary happiness that comes from a great win. I'm sure the last time the Astros won the World Series without banging on trash cans, there was pure joy in Texas. Or was it just happiness, right? Either way, right? Just a win is a win is a win. Very good. Yeah. But we're talking about more than that, like pure joy, the kind that settles deep and that remains even when life is hard. Like a mother's joy, the birth of her child. Oh, there's pain. Oh, there's joy when you hold that baby the first time. They take that breath, they get that cry out, and even in the midst of the cry, there's great joy. So maybe it's holding a grandchild, maybe it's a quiet morning with coffee and a sunrise. That can bring you great joy. Just a perspective of what is out there that is so much bigger than us. Maybe it's a worship that breaks something open inside of you when you sing words like, there's no mountain you won't climb up, like no wall you won't break through. You're coming after me? Really? Oh, that's great joy. Or maybe it's that moment where you realize someone you love is okay. They're going to be okay. This diagnosis isn't going to end in death. This marriage is going to survive that circumstance. That kid that didn't seem really qualified to even graduate high school is now trying to raise kids. And they're going to be okay. You see, we all chase joy and we all want it, But most of the joy we experience is quite fragile and temporary and fleeting. It depends on circumstances staying right. But today, as we close this series, we're going to look at a joy that is so much bigger and so much deeper, so much stronger, so much more motivational than the type of stuff that we experience here. It's a joy that's so strong, it can carry someone through the worst suffering imaginable. Now, over the last few weeks, we've looked at Jesus as the greatest of all time, and we looked at him as the one who stands greatest, above the angels, above the prophets, above all kings and rulers. He was the greatest in standing. We also looked at him as the greatest priest who made the greatest sacrifice at all time. One sacrifice, himself, that satisfied the wrath, God's wrath for all time, that God put on him the sins of all humanity and chased them out like the scapegoat. He became our scapegoat. Last week we talked about him as our greatest hope. That like if one can come back from the dead, what can't be defeated? Right? He's our greatest hope, the sure and steadfast anchor to our soul, rooted in very real promises of God. And we went through some of those promises last week. But today we get to this final word, and I really think these two chapters, chapters 11 and 12 of Hebrews, is what the whole book has been building to. Remember, these people that are receiving this letter for the first time, they lived underneath of a kid who became king. Nero was 16 when he took over the empire. Can you imagine a 16-year-old getting to call all the shots, making all the rules, with all the insecurities that he was still going through while he was going through puberty and ruling? And when he feels threatened by Christians, he sends his soldiers out, rounds them up, and begins to put them to death publicly, brutally, making a show of everything to show that he was the greatest of all time. And these people get this letter. And the author of Hebrews, whether, whoever you think it was, if you think it was Barnabas or Paul or any number of people, Priscilla and Aquila, that's kind of my preferred thought, that I think these two, we can talk about that another day. That's not important. What's important, though, is the author of Hebrews ends this letter with the Faith Hall of Fame. And so you might think that the word for the day would be faith, but actually before we're going to talk about faith, but really the word for the day is joy. Now, I don't know how to separate faith and joy from one another, although I think it happens sometimes. But let's start in Hebrews chapter 11, where we find faith defined. The author of Hebrews says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." Now, if I were to ask you to define faith and you didn't know that verse, I don't think you'd come anywhere close to that definition, right? Like, this is not what we naturally think of as faith unless we've read this letter. And then we start to understand, yeah, faith is about having confidence. But like in our culture, back in the 80s, there was a guy by the name of George who sang a song about you got to have faith. And it was not anything about like this, the faith that he sang about. It was more about faith in people. I wonder how that turned out for him, But we have a confidence in what we hope for. In other words, our hope isn't built on something shakeable or fragile or failing or liable to fail us. Our hope has a sure foundation. It has a solid anchor, like we talked about last week. There's something real that's there that we cannot see. And I think really the best translation of this verse would include a little 3-letter word at the end of it. And it would say, yet. It's not like we're never going to see it. We just don't see it yet. It's coming. But the reason I say that is that takes into full account this idea of confidence in the unseen. It's going to happen. It's just not here yet. It's like when your kids are like, "Are we there yet?" Just my answer all the time on youth trips when you're in a van full of kids. It didn't matter whether you're an hour into the trip or 7 hours into a 14-hour drive. The answer was always the same. It's just around the next curve, I think. They quit asking after you answer that way enough. But we have this confidence that it's coming. My nephew put this out there when he was preaching on faith one time on this passage, and he said, faith is living with confidence that God is going to do what he promised. That's a pretty good definition for a kid. I mean, he's like 40. But when you're raising a kid like Mighty Max, who ends up in the ER all the time, who can't keep food down, so he ends up going in a week ago and having surgery so that he can no longer vomit. Can you imagine that kind of decision making? But watching Drew and Alyssa go through that, they've done it with faith, like amazing faith, that tough circumstances like that builds in a person, right? Faith is living with confidence. Let's focus on that. That's what the author of Hebrews is getting at. He's like, all this is happening around you, but live your faith. He could have used the word work. Like faith is working with the confidence that God is going to answer, fulfill his promises. Because like James, where if you keep reading from where Alvin left off today, James goes on to tell us, hey, faith without works, it's dead. If you don't live your faith, do your work, then what good is it if you just believe? The demons believe, right? But faith comes with a call to action that says, I'm going to live what I believe. So faith is living with confidence that God is going to do what he promised. Now here's where our culture gets it wrong. Our culture says, just believe. Just have faith. And the question is, in what? Right? Because you can put your faith and your belief in a lot of things. Wasn't that long ago we put our belief in a government that said, hey, we got this shot, just take it. You can party together again. It wasn't that long ago that we had faith that our government says, hey, make me president, and wars will end. It wasn't that long ago. You know all the promises that politicians make along the way? But when you put your faith in God, that he's going to do what he promised, he's going to do what he promised. Now, what's amazing about this is the author of Hebrews then goes on and gives us a long list of people who had faith and never saw the promises fulfilled in their lifetime. He goes through the list. You know this. We call it the Faith Hall of Fame, or the Hall of Faith if you want to keep it shorter. Just person after person that obeyed God, but never saw the promises fulfilled. But their faith was unshaken. And after they died, what they believed came true. If we skip clear down, he goes through a list of very familiar names like Abraham and Moses and maybe some that are less familiar to you, or if your memory, maybe you didn't grow up in Sunday school learning about Rahab, Maybe nobody told you the story about the believers that were sawed in two because of their faith. We tend not to tell that one in Sunday school, right? That by placing your faith in Jesus, things could get rough for you. Just because you're baptized doesn't necessarily mean that when you speak out at work, the entire league isn't going to come down on you for your beliefs. There's no promise of that. As a matter of fact, the promise is things are going to get tough when you live out your faith. These are going to be hard times. Well, if we pick up in verse 13 of chapter 11, in the middle of this long list, the author of Hebrews says, they only saw them. In other words, they saw the promises of God, and they welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on the earth. They're like, we know this isn't home. We know that the promise is bigger than this place. He goes on to say, people who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return, but instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. This is after this long list of people who had faith, but didn't see it realized in their lifetime. How do you do that? According to the author of Hebrews, is you have something better to look forward to. Your faith is bigger than a nation. It's bigger than the nation of Israel at the time. It's bigger than Rome at the time. It's bigger than Nero at the time. And it's bigger than the U.S. at this time. It's bigger than that. We have a country that we long for that's not quite here yet. Now, in their case, I think actually what they were longing for most, these people that were reading the book got to see. They had seen Jesus. They had heard the stories of God with us. They knew the miracles he had done. They heard the miraculous teachings. They knew the story that when Jesus was preaching and he said, hey, if you just had faith the size of this little mustard seed, you could say to the mountains, go here, go there. They had caught a glimpse. And the author of Hebrews reminds them, hey, remember what you saw in Jesus? Fix your eyes on that. That's how you get through these moments. And here's the beautiful thing. Now those people, that cloud of witnesses, they now surround us and cheer us on. Can I explain that? Can I explain the physics of that or the metaphysics of that or which dimension they're watching from? I don't, nope. But here's what I know. We're surrounded by this cloud of witnesses that he's just talked about, these people that are cheering us on, that have been through so much more. And I think especially like these people at that point in time were like, wow, my hero has become my cheerleader. Like they are for us. We're going to make this. And so the author starts the next chapter, chapter 12, with these words. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked for us. Isn't that a beautiful picture? And appropriate too, because isn't this what we struggle with? We get so easily entangled in sin. Even when we've said, not today, Satan, no more, not for me, it's not for me. And yet it comes back to get us. And if it's not our sin and our temptations, it's the sin and temptations of somebody else that affects us or affects somebody we love. And we're like, oh, I just get so fed up and frustrated. Yeah, that's the devil working on you. He's trying to trip you up in your run, in your race. He threw it at Jesus too. He was tempted, remember? Like he's in this race, he's running the race, he's got his marching orders. And he's in the garden and he says, Father, not my will, but your will be done. And he's tempted. He's like, I'll do this because it's what you want for me, but it's not really what I want for me. But it's your will, I will fulfill it. This is your plan, I will pursue it. Devil tempted him. He even tempted him through his friends that night in the garden. He's like, hey, I need you guys to stay awake. I need you to pray with me and watch, and I need you to have my backs here. And they kept falling asleep. Remember that? He didn't have his back. And he's dealing with one of the most tempting times, not only of his lifetime, but of all humanity. So what kept him going? That last sentence, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Jesus ran what was marked out for him. And so that's why the author of Hebrews says, look at him. Take a look at Jesus. He says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer, the perfecter of our faith. I like the translation that's earlier than this one that says, who for the joy set before him. But it doesn't matter. For the joy set before Jesus, he endured the cross. He scorned the shame of the cross. By the way, do you know what the shame of the cross was like? Like that instrument of death and torture that Nero was using on believers as well, that instrument of torture was designed to bring public shame to the criminals hung there. It was designed so that when you were hung on a cross, you weren't 30 feet in the air like you see in the movies. You're about 3 feet in the air so that people can come along and mock you and spit at you in your nakedness and your shame. So you had to look them in the eye as they looked at you. And Jesus scorned not the fact that he was being crucified, but he just scorned the shame. He endured the cross. No shame in that game for him. He's okay. They tried to put me to shame, but he gladly bore our sin and our sorrows on himself that day. And then he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And he's telling these people that's where he is. He's in the best position to help you through this time, help you through this struggle. Once he finished, and he took that sin in our name. And it was done, and then he took his seat with the Father. But I don't want to skip through this very small 3-letter word that's in the sentence. This is one of those passages that it's a life verse for me. And the thing that I remember most, I remember memorizing this when I was 10 or 12 years old at church camp. But the word that stuck out to me the most, I just could not understand at that age. And now it's the one I latch on to the most. For the joy set before Jesus. What was the joy set before him? He was enduring a cross. He was enduring scorn and shame and had the weight of the world on him. What is the joy in that? It was that he could look past that, longing for that other country like the others did in chapter 11, looking ahead for the joy set before him that one day we would be with him. You are the joy set before Jesus. I am the joy set before Jesus. This community that he is welcoming into heaven, that's the joy set before him. That submission to reconcile God and humanity despite our sin. He's like, this is what we look forward to. This is what we long for. And I can't explain why he had to go to the cross to get us back to that spot, but this was God's plan. So the author of Hebrews goes on to say, consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Don't miss the promise that's not there. He doesn't make some of the promises we talked about last week. He doesn't say you'll never have pain. He doesn't say you'll never have sorrow. As a matter of fact, he promised that if you're going to be my follower, you're going to take up your cross. The joy set before Jesus was not the absence of pain. It was not an easy life. It was not escaping the cross. The joy was that one day we would be together with him, that the people he loved would be redeemed and forgiven and brought home. That the relationship broken in the garden would be restored in the new garden, in the new heaven, the new earth, and that we would be his forever. So the challenge and encouragement today is pretty simple. Look to Jesus. There's a lot of other things that we can look at. But Jesus is greater than all these other things that we're tempted to focus on. Like Jesus is greater than pain. Anybody in pain today? I get halfway here and I'm like, oh. And I called Julie and I said, hey, would you bring the Tramadol with you, please? Because it'd been 5 days since I'd felt that kidney stone. But on the way here, I'm like, oh, that's a kidney stone again. He's made its move. It's like, and you got to get through it in order to get to the other side of the pain. But so I'm preaching with a little bit of Tramadol in me, so give me a little grace if I mispronounce a word or something. But Jesus is greater than our pain, and Jesus is greater than our suffering, and Jesus is greater than our weariness. Anybody tired? It's like, he's greater than the temptation that you're facing. He's greater than whatever addiction you're dealing with. He's greater than the shame you wear because you got caught in your addiction. He's greater than your bank account, whether it's huge or little. He's greater than your career goals. He's greater than your retirement plan or your lack of a retirement plan. He's greater. He's greater than your mistakes. He's greater than anything that's in your back window. What we have to look forward in the front window, it's greater. He promises. He's greater than your regrets, and he's greater than your sins, your doubts, your struggles, your disbelief. And on Easter Sunday morning, he proved he was greater than death itself. If you go through that list, if you're reading with us this week in the devotions that were being texted to you, there's this line in there where it talks about all the terrible things that these people went through as part of this hall of faith. And then there's this line about these women who received back their dead. Did you catch that line? As I was reading through that, I was like, I forgot about that. And then I'm sitting there thinking, well, wait a minute. All these other things were terrible things that happened that they had to endure. And then I thought, well, let's see, if my mom had to receive my dad back from the dead, that'd probably be a struggle and a temptation too. I don't know if it was a reward or a punishment to welcome somebody back from the dead, who knows. But welcoming Jesus back from the dead, oh man, nothing but reward. And the reward is a confident faith that we can put our trust in him. And so we look to Jesus. We fix our eyes on Jesus. It's interesting. I don't know if any of you ever do chiropractic care, but I had a chiropractor in Nebraska. And the first thing he did with me was eye therapy. I don't know if you've been through this or not, but it's this new thing. And he would have me do these exercises with my eyes. Have any of you been through this? And he was like, this is what's going to reset your brain and reset your body to heal you. I didn't go to him for very long. But it's a legit, I looked it up, it's a legit type of therapy that as you fix your eyes, which our eyes are so focused on meaningless things today, he's like, when you fix your eyes, it opens up your mind, and your mind helps open up your body to healing in ways that we're only now beginning to research. And the best way to fix your eyes is to fix your eyes on Jesus. Let that be the door that opens up the rest of the healing in your life. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Run the race with endurance. Don't give up, because the same joy that sustained him, that joy that one day we're going to be there in that other country, that other place where there is no more death, where there are no more elections, where there are no more supervisors, where there are no more neighbors with thumping basses, or maybe there are lots of neighbors with thumping basses. I would be okay with that one. But where all these things that bother us here, those are gone. And instead, we have this unfettered worship in a place filled with chocolate. No, in a place where the presence of God is with us and we dwell with him, and there's nothing between us. Just pure joy of being in his presence. That is what sustained Jesus, and that's what's available to each of us. So when the race feels long, look to Jesus. When the shame tries to define you, look to Jesus. When you're growing weary, look to Jesus, who endured. When the joy feels distant, look to Jesus, who despite the cross found joy on the other side. Look to Jesus, the one who's already ran the race, finished it, for the joy of bringing you home. This series, and all the themes of this series come together in this passage. Jesus is the superior message. He stands alone, greater than the prophets, greater than the angels, greater than the kings of this world. He was the greater priest whose only job was to reconcile us to God. by paying for our sin and casting it away. And he provided the perfect sacrifice as the perfect priest. The price has been paid. And he secured a perfect hope for us. And so that's the joy we pursue. But understand this pursuit. It's not just about trying harder. If you come to church and the message you receive is, I got to get better, you miss the message. Come to church and the message is simply this: the Christian life is about looking longer at Jesus. Keep your eyes focused on him. Live, love, lead like Jesus. So if you've been running with your eyes fixed on everything else and you feel broken, that's probably the reason. Your eyes are fixed on everything else. Fixed on your neighbor, or your neighbor's wife, or your neighbor's boat, or your neighbor's kids, or your neighbor's grandkids. Your gaze is broken. Let Jesus fix your gaze. Let him capture it. If you've grown weary, consider him who endured. Most importantly, if you've never put your hope in Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross for you and for me, today's the day to do that. Would you stand? Let's pray.